The morning sun filtered through the glass walls of the bustling airport terminal. The air was filled with the hum of rolling suitcases, the chatter of impatient travelers, and the steady voice of announcements echoing through the hall. Among the polished shoes and designer luggage, a single figure stood out. Marcus Brown, a tired-looking man in his early 50s. His once dark jacket was faded, his shirt collar slightly open, and his shoes bore the dust of long journeys. His face, marked by years of struggle, carried both fatigue and quiet dignity. People glanced at him with suspicion, their eyes saying what their lips did not. He didn't belong here. Marcus clutched his old leather bag close to his chest and waited quietly in line. When his turn came, he handed his ticket to the attendant with a polite nod. The woman hesitated for a brief second, then forced a smile and waved him through. Inside the aircraft, the atmosphere was lively. Laughter, perfume, and the clicking sound of phones taking selfies. Marcus moved slowly down the aisle, searching for his seat. His breathing was heavy, not from age but from the weight of invisible burdens. Finally he reached seat 17A by the window and sat down. The young woman beside him, Vanessa, a business executive in her 30s, wrinkled her nose in disgust. She quickly pulled out a scented tissue and held it near her face, whispering to herself, "Oh Lord, what's that smell?" Marcus noticed her discomfort but said nothing. He simply turned his gaze toward the window, where clouds drifted lazily across the morning sky. From a few rows away, the flight attendant, Tanya Brooks, noticed the scene. Her professional smile faltered for a moment as she observed the man's worn-out appearance. She hesitated, then walked over, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "Tanya. Excuse me, sir. May I see your boarding pass once again?" Marcus, calmly, with a gentle smile, "Of course. Here it is." She examined the ticket carefully, then glanced at his face, uncertain. Everything was in order. With a polite nod, she handed it back and moved away. Still, the doubt lingered in her eyes. Marcus leaned back in his seat, adjusting the small, creaky armrest. The cabin around him buzzed with energy, but his world was silent, a quiet island of reflection amid the chatter. Outside, sunlight hit the airplane wing, glinting like silver. For a brief moment, his expression softened. He reached into his pocket and touched something, a pair of old pilot's wings worn and scratched with time. His thumb traced the edges gently. A faint smile crossed his lips. No one around him could have guessed that this weary man, dressed in rags, had once commanded the skies, that his hands had once guided hundreds of lives safely through storms. To everyone else, he was just a strange passenger. To fate, he was a legend waiting to rise again. The seatbelt sign flickered off, and the cabin filled with the usual rhythm of a flight. Murmurs, laughter, the rustle of magazines. Marcus sat quietly, his eyes lost in the moving clouds outside. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered, a man who had seen both glory and ruin. From behind, a cheerful voice broke the silence. "Hey, wait a second. Marcus Brown. Is that really you?" He turned slowly. Standing in the aisle was David Carter, a tall, confident man in an expensive suit and gold watch, smiling with disbelief. Marcus, softly, "David. It's been a long time." "David. Man, I can't believe it's you." Marcus Brown, the guy who used to top every class. The genius, the golden boy. "What happened to you, brother?" The passengers nearby turned to look. Marcus gave a polite smile, but his eyes carried a shadow. "Marcus. Life happened, David. That's all." David laughed a little too loudly. "You were born for success, man. I remember. Scholarship, medals, that pilot dream of yours. And now, what, you're flying economy in worn-out clothes." His words cut through the air like cold steel. Vanessa, still seated beside Marcus, smirked. The others chuckled quietly, pretending not to listen. Marcus looked down at his rough hands. The laughter around him blurred into silence. His thoughts drifted far away, To the cockpit lights, the steady hum of engines, the thrill of flight. Once, he had been Captain Marcus Brown, a name spoken with pride across the skies. Then came that terrible day. Storm. A malfunction. A tragedy blamed on him, though it wasn't his fault. The investigation had stripped him of his wings, his job, and his dignity. Overnight, the hero became the scapegoat. He carried that weight ever since. The shame, the whispers, the empty eyes of those who had once admired him. Back in the present, David's voice snapped him out of the memories. David. Hey, I didn't mean to sound harsh, but you really let yourself go, man. Look at me, CEO now, 3 cars, penthouse apartment. You should have stayed in touch. Marcus simply nodded. Marcus. I'm glad life's been good to you, David. David. Yeah, you could say that. Marcus turned back to the window, his reflection overlapping with the clouds. He reached into his small bag and pulled out a framed photograph, a younger version of himself in a pilot uniform, smiling proudly beside an airplane. His hand trembled slightly as he set the photo back down. A long sigh escaped his lips. Outside, the clouds grew darker, the light dimmer, as if the sky itself remembered his pain. No one in that cabin knew that beneath those worn clothes sat a man who once ruled the very heavens they were flying through. A man waiting for one last chance to prove that his story wasn't over yet. The hum of the engines filled the air with a steady calm. Passengers relaxed, scrolling on their phones, chatting, sipping coffee from tiny cups. Marcus remained silent, still watching the horizon through the window. The sky outside was beginning to shift, the soft blue now turning to gray. A low rumble rolled through the clouds. First no one noticed. Then, a sudden flicker of lightning flashed across the sky. The plane trembled lightly, just enough to make hearts skip a beat. Tanya, the flight attendant, picked up the intercom. Her voice was calm but tense. Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. We're experiencing a little turbulence. Everything is under control. Passengers obeyed, some nervously laughing, others whispering prayers. Marcus tightened his belt and closed his eyes briefly, his fingers instinctively brushing against the invisible controls he once knew so well. Then it happened. A loud crack of thunder shook the plane violently. The overhead bins rattled. Baby started crying. Drinks spilled and shouts filled the air. The aircraft dipped sharply, making hearts leap into throats. Tanya's voice trembling now. Please remain seated. Keep your seatbelts fastened. Marcus opened his eyes, calm amid the chaos. His instincts had returned, old reflexes awakening like a heartbeat. Moments later, the cockpit door flew open. Tanya stumbled out, pale and trembling. Please. Is there a doctor here? The captain, he's unconscious. He had a stroke. Gasps rippled through the cabin. A man stood up. Dr. Hill, a middle-aged doctor seated near the front. He rushed forward. The cabin fell into stunned silence, broken only by the crying child and the rising roar of the wind outside. Minutes later, Dr. Hill returned, his face grim. Dr. Hill. The pilot can't continue. He's breathing, but he's in no condition to fly. Tanya's voice cracked through the intercom again. Dear passengers, the situation is serious. The captain is unwell, and we are flying through a severe storm. Is there anyone on board who can operate an aircraft? No one moved. Faces turned pale, lips trembled. Fear spread like fire through the cabin. David leaned over to Marcus, whispering sharply. David. This is bad. Real bad. Lightning flashed again, illuminating Marcus's calm, steady face. His eyes, once filled with sadness, now glowed with purpose. He slowly unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. The passengers around him stared in disbelief. Marcus, quiet but firm. I can fly this plane. A wave of murmurs swept through the rows. Vanessa. What? Him. No way. David, mocking you. Don't be ridiculous, Marcus. Sit down before you kill us all. But Tanya looked desperate. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. Tanya. Sir, do you really know how to fly? Marcus, steady, calm. Yes. I was a pilot once. And I can still do this. For a brief moment time froze. The passengers stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or believe. But there was something in his tone, a confidence that silenced even the doubters. From inside the cockpit, the co-pilot's voice echoed through the speaker. If anyone here has flight experience, send him in now. I can't handle this alone. Marcus took a deep breath. His eyes focused and alive. The man everyone mocked moments ago was no longer the same. He straightened his old jacket and walked toward the cockpit with a calm determination. Each step echoed with the weight of destiny. No one could have guessed. The man they had judged by his clothes was about to hold all their lives in his hands. Marcus stepped into the cockpit, the door closing behind him with a soft thud. The dim lights flickered over the control panels, casting shadows on the sweating face of co-pilot Ethan Ross, barely keeping the aircraft steady. Ethan panicked. Who are you? Marcus, calmly. Marcus Brown. Former captain, Skyjet Airlines. Ethan's eyes widened. He froze for a moment, searching his memory. That name, he had heard it before. Ethan. Wait. Marcus Brown. The Marcus Brown. The man who landed Flight 213 in a storm 20 years ago. Marcus nodded quietly, sliding into the pilot's seat as if he had never left it. His fingers brushed over the familiar switches, the levers, the worn grip of the control stick. The sound of the engines roared through the cabin like an angry sea. Marcus. Let's stabilize her. Altitude's dropping too fast. Ethan stammering, yes, sir. Outside, the storm was merciless. The rain lashed against the glass like fists. Lightning danced across the dark sky, and the plane rocked violently. Marcus's hands moved with precision and calm, flipping switches, adjusting throttle, speaking into the radio. Marcus, into headset control. This is Captain Marcus Brown. Our pilot is down. We're requesting emergency landing clearance. Repeat. Emergency landing. For a moment there was silence on the line. Then came a voice filled with shock. Control tower. Captain Brown. Sir, is that really you? We still remember Flight 213. Copy that, Captain. Runway is clear. You have permission to land. Ethan stared at Marcus, awe replacing fear. He watched as the older man guided the trembling aircraft through chaos like a seasoned warrior returning to battle. In the passenger cabin, panic slowly gave way to hope. Tanya peeked through the small cockpit window, tears forming in her eyes as she saw Marcus. Focused, calm, unshakable. The storm howled, trying to tear the plane apart. Marcus's voice was steady. Marcus. Keep the flaps at 10. Reduce throttle to 75. We'll ride the wind. His eyes were alive again, sharp, determined, commanding. The years of pain, the shame, the loss, all melted away. In this moment he was himself again. A captain, a protector, a man reborn. Ethan in disbelief. How are you doing this? I thought you hadn't flown in years. Marcus. You don't forget how to breathe, son. You just stop trusting yourself for a while. The clouds began to thin. The lights of the city glowed faintly below, shimmering like stars on the earth. The passengers fell silent, gripping their seats, waiting for a miracle. Marcus guided the aircraft down gently. Flaps full. Gear down. Hold her steady. The wheels kissed the runway with barely a sound. No bounce, no jolt. Just a perfect landing, smooth as silk. The cabin exploded in applause and tears. Tanya covered her mouth, whispering. He did it, he really did it. Ethan leaned back in awe. Ethan. Captain, that was flawless. Marcus, softly, smiling. Just another day in the sky. The plane rolled to a smooth stop on the runway. For a moment, there was only silence. No applause, no whispers, just the stunned heartbeat of hundreds of souls realizing they were safe. Then, like a wave rising from the depths, applause erupted through the cabin. People cheered, cried, hugged one another. Some clapped until their hands hurt. The fear that had gripped them minutes ago dissolved into gratitude and disbelief. The cockpit door opened, and Marcus Brown stepped out. His shirt was damp with sweat, his hair tousled, but his face carried a calm glow, the quiet pride of a man who had found himself again. Every eye turned toward him. The same passengers who had once judged him for his old clothes now looked at him as if they were seeing light for the first time. Vanessa, the woman who had pressed a handkerchief to her nose, stood frozen, guilt heavy in her chest. She lowered her eyes and whispered softly, "I'm sorry, sir." Marcus gave her a gentle nod, saying nothing. Forgiveness was already in his eyes. David, still pale, stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Marcus, I mocked you. I thought you'd fallen so far. But you saved us all." Marcus, smiling faintly. "It's not about how far we fall, David. It's about whether we rise again." The cabin grew quiet again, not out of fear this time but out of deep respect. Even the children fell silent, watching the man who had turned despair into deliverance. Suddenly, a few airline officers entered the plane, rushing through the aisle. One of them, Officer Raymond, approached Marcus and saluted him. "Officer Raymond. Sir, we were monitoring your landing from the tower. That was perfection. On behalf of the board, we'd be honored if you'd consider returning. The skies still need men like you." Marcus looked past him, through the small window beside the exit. The morning light was breaking through the clouds, golden and peaceful. "Marcus, quietly. They took away my uniform, but they never took away my courage." A tear rolled down Tanya's cheek as she clapped, and soon the entire cabin joined her. One by one, passengers stood, their applause echoing like thunder through the aircraft. For the first time in years, Marcus smiled, not the polite smile of a tired man, but the proud, peaceful smile of a hero who had made peace with his past. As he walked down the aisle toward the exit, people leaned aside respectfully. Some whispered, "Thank you, Captain." Others simply bowed their heads. Outside, the sun had broken through completely, painting the sky in gold. Marcus paused on the steps of the plane, looked up at the vast open heavens, and whispered, "Home." He walked away slowly, his shadow stretching across the tarmac, a man who had fallen from the sky, only to rise higher than ever before. If you loved this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. Tell us in the comments, from which country are you watching?